Web Marketing That Works podcast, episode number 4.
Welcome to the Web Marketing That Works podcast. Come behind the scenes of real-life marketing experiments and listen in as amazing guests confess the truth about what really works. Now, here are your hosts, Adam Franklin and Toby Jenkins.
Hello listeners, it's Adam Franklin from the Web Marketing That Works podcast, and I'm joined by my co-host, Toby Jenkins. How's things, Tobe?
Good, thanks, Ad. Hi, everyone.
This is the show for people who love marketing on the web. Toby and I will take you behind the scenes of real-life marketing experiments where we look at the good, the bad, and the ugly. We confess what's failed and reveal the truth about what really works.
This show is brought to you by our new book, Web Marketing That Works, and specifically the bonus 33 templates that go with it. So if you're keen to download those free templates, please duck across to our website, bluewiremedia.com.au/book.
And the guest on today's show is a Queenslander called Dan Norris.
And what are we exploring with Dan, Ads?
Well, Dan's a very interesting guest for the show, Topes. He's had a similar background to us in terms of running a web design business for many years before sort of pivoting out of that into his new business called WP Curve, which he talks a lot about in this interview. He also covers some of his failures over the years and what he's learnt to now be in a business that's consistently profitable with reliable monthly revenue coming in. So that's really quite exciting. And he shares with us his goals for this year as well. So a really interesting episode. How about we get on with the show, Tobes?
Sounds good.
Hello, listeners. It's Adam Franklin here from the Web Marketing That Works podcast. I'm here with a very special guest and a friend, Dan Norris. Dan, thanks for joining us.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure.
Look forward to it.
So Dan is a driven and relentless entrepreneur with an obsession for content marketing. His content has been described by Joe Pulizzi, the content marketing godfather himself, as must-read. Dan was voted Australia's top small business blogger by Australia's largest business magazine, Smarter Business Ideas, in 2013. His current business, WP Curve, provides unlimited, small WordPress fixes 24/7 for $69 per month. It became profitable in just 23 days and hit $10,000 per month in recurring revenue in 6 months. And you can reach Dan via his blog, thedannorris.com. Welcome, Dan.
Thanks, man. The only thing is, I probably should have told you before, but we've just in the last day or two, we've moved our the personal content over to startupchat.co because so we don't have the Dan Norris anymore, but it just redirects. Because I've got a co-founder now, and it doesn't really make sense to actually. In the past, when you Googled my name, his face would show up because he's putting all his content on the site. So,
and you don't want to be hogging all the glory, do you?
No.
Now, Dan, that was only a small introduction. Would you mind giving us a brief overview of your business?
So, WP Curve is the main part of our business. Up until 6 months ago, that business didn't exist, and So what happened was I started a small agency, which is when I met you a long time ago. I think I started around the same time as you started Blue Wire, which is, I think, in 2006. And I really struggled for a lot of years just trying to work out how to grow. And I never really found that place of momentum, where you get to that spot where things really start taking off. And I tried everything I could to fix that. And in the end, I just wasn't able to. So I sold it, and then I spent a year writing a lot of content. Sorry, I've got a bit of man flu at the moment. But so I spent a year writing a lot of content and creating a software business that ultimately failed. And at the end of that year, which was 6 months ago, we launched WP Curve, and now we have across all of the different things we have, which is mainly WP Curve and a couple of plugins and things. We've got 189 customers, I think, as of today. And we're really in that nice place of having momentum, and things are starting to work well. Because a lot to do with the content we've written in the past, and we continue to write.
Great. Now, what is your web marketing philosophy, Dan?
Well, I mean, I think what probably makes us a bit different is is the transparency of what we do. So I was doing, as an example, I was doing income reports when I had zero income. And we continue to do them now, but they're hard to write when you have zero income. But if you take that stance of being transparent in everything that you do, then and coming from a place of just really wanting to help people. I mean, it helps people to know that I had no income at the time, and it helps people to look at that content, look at what I was doing, and that it wasn't leading to any income. And it also helps them to know that we do have income now based on what we're doing and what's working. So if you're coming from that place of wanting to help people and being prepared to be as transparent as you can, then that's the kind of content we create, and I guess that's our philosophy.
Well, it's really great for our listeners because, it goes to show that, there is a lot of trial and error and heartache in the lead up to actually getting a business that does have a revenue stream like yours has in, this particular business that's been particularly short time. What have been your aha moments in that journey from a couple of false starts to this WP Curve business, which is driving recurring revenue?
There's probably a few things. The actual starting of WP Curve was definitely an aha moment because it really was the first time. And so I've been in business for 7.5 years now, and I really have never been in that place where I've launched something and it's gathered momentum, which is what every business owner wants. You want to do something and you want to just feel that moving forward. And launching WP Curve was the first time that happened. So I launched it. I got a customer on day one. Within a week, we had 10 customers. Within a month, we had probably 20 customers. And 6 months later, we have 180 customers. So, I mean, that was a big turning point. And just reflecting on why that was, and I guess one of the reasons why I think it is that we've picked a problem that people are trying to solve already, as opposed to trying to invent a solution to something. And we're solving it in a unique way. And what helps, I think, two things that help. One is the simplicity of it. People know they can pay $70 a month and get unlimited fixes. They don't need to think about, and it's 24/7. They don't need to think about when we're working, and they don't need to think about how much it's going to cost them. They don't need to think about how many fixes they can request. They don't have to budget for it. All they have to budget is $69 a month, and their WordPress site will be fine. So the simplicity of it is I guess an aha moment. Just taking that decision away from people makes them a lot more likely to sign up. And the other thing was just around responsiveness. I think that if you're in any type of service business, as you would know, what people really, there's a lot of things that drive purchasing decisions, but what people really love is when you respond quickly. So whether that's for if someone contacts you about a project and you simply just acknowledge that you've got the message, quicker than the next person, then you're much more likely to get the work. In our case, if we can do the work quicker than the next person, then that's the thing that our customers really like. Like, they like the fact that it's low price and that we're always there, and that we're competent developers and we're probably nice guys. They probably like all of that. But what they really care about is responsiveness. And so if you're in a services business, then that would be what I would be focusing on.
That's a really interesting point, I think, because, from us both being in web design businesses originally to moving away from that to me personally giving more advice, consulting and mentoring, you running this startup WP Curve, the fact that WordPress is obviously easy to use as a blogger, but there's so many things that you need to fix, as you say, like there's plugins, there's upgrades, there's all of that happening all the time, and you don't want to let that get too far behind or else things will break. So the fact that you've actually taken an existing problem and known firsthand, I guess, because of your own experience with blogging, but also all the people that you interact with, but then taking away that decision, making it easy for the person, like there's one choice, you either sign up or you don't. It's not a matter of sending stuff in, getting a quote back, worrying if the person's at home or at work or able to do the work, or worried about an excessive bill at the end of it all. I think that simplicity that really strikes home for me too, as I can see why that has had such good uptake compared to, say, some of the other things that we've both tried doing in the past.
Yeah, I mean, and it works. I mean, it's not like the idea of turning something into a recurring service or a fixed price is a new idea, or even an unlimited service. I mean, there's loads of examples of unlimited services, and even that insurance aspect of just kind of paying for something that you may or may not use this month, but you might use 10 times next month. All of this stuff's been done before. It just doesn't seem to have been done, at least to my knowledge, it doesn't seem to have been done with WordPress. And I mean, even if it has, I'm not really that worried. We don't spend too much time worrying about that. We just kind of try to get people's attention and try to do a good job, and it results in people signing up and referring people.
That's great. And with 20% of the world's websites running on WordPress, there's no shortage of people out there. And the good thing is, even if there are competitors, it means that there's a validated need for your service, and you just happen to be doing it better than everybody else, as far as I can tell anyway.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's definitely competitors. There's every website owner's got this problem that, you know, they either go the agency route or they go to Elance and try to find a developer, or, you know, they go to one of the support. There's definitely WordPress support services out there. I mean, in my last business, I was doing monthly support anyway, and there's probably millions of small freelancers around the world that, you know, do like a $50 monthly support package. So I think if you pick a problem that people are solving already, you kind of take validation out of the piece. You already know they have the problem. You know the price is reasonable, and it just becomes about, you know, getting more customers and doing a good job.
And in terms of getting new customers, Dan, that'll take us into the second section of this podcast, the marketing experiments, which is something that I've always been passionate about. I know you have been too, because testing these things, you just have to get in and try new things to see what sticks, see what doesn't, see how you can improve things. So what I'd like to do in this section is go through the good, the bad, and the ugly. Let's start with the good. What have you tried that's worked really well?
Well, this will be a quick section, because the only two things we've tried that work at all for us are content marketing and if you can call doing a good job and getting referrals marketing, then that's what works for us, because as of 6 months ago, we've spent $180 on advertising, you know, and it didn't work, and we're not good at it, and it's not fun, so we don't do it. We just do content marketing and try to maximize referrals and maximize the proof on our page. So making sure that the information on our site is full of testimonials and that kind of stuff is what we do. I've tried lots and lots of stuff in the past. I can probably talk about experiments we've done with content, like within content marketing, that some have worked and some haven't. But in terms of marketing generally, I've never discovered anything that I can do well that brings me business. And so that's why we focus on content, because we know we can do it well.
And I like your point about, actually, you know, I'm a Seth Godin junkie, but the fact that marketing's got to be built into the product in the first place. Otherwise, marketing will just accelerate you to failure quicker if you don't have good quality marketing built into the product. So it's great to hear that you've got a service that works and that, you know, delivers on its promises. Plus, then you've got the content marketing side of things. So let's dive a bit deeper into what's actually worked within the content marketing realm for you.
So I know I've heard you guys talk a lot about the templates you do, and a lot of your stuff has influenced what we do as well. So definitely things like the templates. One thing we've done is put up a Google Doc, which is like a 15-page document that allows people to review their website for conversion. So if they're a content marketer, they're using WordPress, they want more conversions, we give away this 15-page document that's a Google Doc. And we do it in a way that we do it in a couple of ways that increases the amount of downloads. One is we put it as a call to action after every post that relates to conversions. So we do, and I know you use HubSpot, right?
We do, yeah.
Yeah, so this is a HubSpot idea. Well, this, at least that's where I saw it first. It's just the idea of putting out content about something, and then at the end of that piece of content, putting in a call to action for something that's valuable that specifically relates to that content. And that throws conversions through the roof compared to just putting an email subscribe form on. So we get a lot of people through that. Like, we'll put a post out about conversions, reviewing someone's site, and the call to action will be download our free conversion review. And from there, they go onto a sequence in Infusionsoft. And I haven't used HubSpot, but I think there's a little bit of overlap between the two. It's similar kind of thing. And they start getting content that's more relevant for them. And just generally in Infusionsoft, we do a lot of linking to existing content. So if anyone shows an interest in conversions at all, then we'll link them to that conversion review, and eventually it just spreads and becomes a popular post and becomes a big conversion point for us.
So just for the listeners that don't know what a sequence is, can you just explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, so I guess if they don't know what a sequence is, then they're probably either not collecting email addresses, which is hopefully not true, or they're just using something like MailChimp or Aweber and just sending out a blast to everyone and sending the same information to them. We do that as well. We have a weekly email that goes out, but on top of that, we have specific sets of emails that go to people based on certain things. And it could be based on self-identified things, like if they've identified themselves as an influencer, then they'll get different emails to someone who's identified themselves as a web agency. Or it could be based on things we know. It could be based on where they complete the opt-in form on the site or how long they've been a subscriber. Whether they've clicked a link in an email that shows that they're interested in WP Curve. If they are, then they'll get on a pitch sequence that tells them and gives them an offer to sign up. So sequences are about sending people more relevant information based on what you know about them.
Perfect. So people download a piece of content, they read your blog post, and they get that call. They see that call to action, and it says, if you're interested in finding out more, download this 15-page Google Doc. And then when they do that, they're entering their name and their email address and then going onto an email sequence from you based on specific behaviors that you know that they've completed on your website.
Yep, that's it. And we use Infusionsoft. You can do it with HubSpot. You can do it with, I think you can do it to some extent with things like MailChimp and Aweber now, but Infusionsoft, it's really like the way they do it, it's visual and you can drag stuff around. You can actually see the process of where people will go. And it just makes it, to me, it makes it easier. I hear a lot of people saying it's confusing to use, but to me, it makes it a lot easier to use something like that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we use HubSpot. We also use Campaign Monitor for that as an email system. I know you can use Vision 6's Vmail and have campaigns set up like that. So, I mean, not all, but most of the software does similar stuff. Just, it's a matter of picking one that you're comfortable with and that you understand how to use, hey?
Yeah, yep.
All right, mate. So we've had the good. Now let's get on to the bad marketing experiments. What's failed, and then what did you learn and would you do differently?
Okay. One thing that failed, which might be interesting to your audience, is marketing to agencies. And that's probably our biggest failure in the last 6 months. And it's nice to talk about failure when everything's going well, because it's not really failure because everything else is working. So we're not worried about it. But it was a big learning point where we dedicated a lot of time. I think Alex, my co-founder, probably had 50 phone calls with different agencies. We set up a white label plan, changed the service we were offering. They made all sorts of changes. We had phone calls, we had emails back and forth. We had one email thread with about 50 emails to one guy. We had automation sequences, everything for these agencies. We even did paid advertising. I think we did a bit of retargeting. And after like 3 or 4 months, and to Alex's credit, he picked up after a couple of months that this was just not working. And for whatever reason, agencies just didn't want to resell our services, which we can get to if you want to. But I mean, the interesting thing, I think, is probably just the fact that they didn't want to. And it took us quite a while to work that out. We had assumptions about it based on just thinking it made sense for agencies to, and everyone we spoke to just said, yeah, this is a really good thing for agencies. They would resell this, put a bit of a premium on top of it, and everyone's happy. But our learning told us that it wasn't the case. And so that was a big learning thing for us. And as a result of that, we move a lot quicker now. And every time we make an assumption, we just take a step back and we say, actually, we're making an assumption here. How can we test that as quickly as possible before we go too far down that rabbit hole?
Nice. Now, mate, how about the ugly? How about a confession as to if you've had any absolute dead set shockers? I have, but have you?
Well, I mean, with WP Curve, honestly, it's the last 6 months have been amazing because everything is going well. I mean, the whole year before that was a shocker, really. I mean, I worked on a piece of software that changed so much because I was just trying to work out how to make it valuable to people. And after a year, I had $476 a month in recurring revenue, and I was a couple of weeks away from having to get a job. So, I mean, I don't know if failure is getting bigger than that. I'd spent all the money I sold my last business for, and I was very, very close to having to go get a job. So, I mean, that's as big as failure gets for me, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for sharing that with us. Now, if you were starting from scratch, what advice would you have for somebody else looking to start their web marketing journey?
Well, I mean, I think the core of web marketing, at least if you're doing it from a content point of view, is building an audience. So I would focus on conversions initially and by that I mean when people go to your site, you want to get their email address and I was chatting to Neil Patel last week on our podcast about this, and he basically said, like, when he puts content out now, he doesn't do anything. He just puts the content out and that's it. But for the first couple of months, he had to do a lot. And I think there's a tipping point with content where you're pushing shit uphill for a certain amount of time, and then you get to that tipping point where you can just put the content out and it kind of self-sustains because you've got that audience and you can send them an email and you're guaranteed that at least 500 or so people are going to see the content and share it. So I think looking out for that tipping point is what I would be thinking about if you haven't reached it yet. And what I would be focusing on in that time is converting your visitors to subscribers by giving away something really valuable and getting new audience members. So I think one mistake I see a lot of people make is they create a lot of content on their site, but they're creating the content on their site for the same people. It's never getting new eyeballs on it. So that's going to kill your conversions, because these people, if they were going to convert, they would have already, to some extent. I mean, you might get a few more, but what you really need to do is get new audience members. And you do that by doing offsite content. You can do it in other ways. You can do it by promoting your content, reaching out to people, or syndicating your content. But for me, it was doing offsite content, blog posts, interviews like this, and just really taking seriously how much content you put on other sites, to the point where you're putting more of your best stuff elsewhere. And until you get to that point where you can just put your best stuff on your own site and you know it's going to get traction.
And what sort of ratios are we talking here, Dan, in terms of how much you put on other people's site versus how much goes on your own site, particularly in the starting out phase?
Yeah, so I like 70-30 if you're going to come up with any kind of general rule. And that might mean, like, if you're doing, say in our case, we're doing one piece of content a day, it might mean kind of a couple of blog posts on your own site and one or two interviews on someone else's site and a guest post. It depends a lot as well on the type of person you are. A lot of people are really comfortable going out and trying to promote their content and cold emailing people and hitting them up on Twitter saying this is suitable, you should do that, which is all really good to do. A lot of people are really good at the automation side and the sequences. For me, I found that I enjoyed doing the content. So for me, doing content offsite made the most amount of sense, and it was a good for authority as well, because you could get. I think when I first started, after I sold my last business, I did within a month or so. I had posts on ProBlogger and Think Traffic, and Firepole Marketing, and a couple of pretty well-known blogs. And that really helped with early credibility, because I could just, if I wanted a guest post anywhere, I could say, look, here's my post on ProBlogger that I wrote. It's got 150 comments, and you can see I've replied to every one of them. So you can see that I'm actually care about this stuff. And that automatic credibility makes it so much easier to get other guest posting jobs or other interviews down the track.
And mate, what's next for you on the marketing front?
So 2014, our basic goal is to double everything in our business. So we want to double the annual recurring revenue run rate to $250,000, and we want to double our traffic to about 50 or 60,000 visits a month, because I think we're at about 25 to 30,000 in a good month. Double our email list to about 12,000 people. And we want to, I'm not exactly sure how much content we put out in the last year, but we want to put out one piece of content a day on average. So we want to put out 365 pieces of content. And that's going to be stuff like this, our own content on our site, and we're doing a weekly podcast, a live podcast where we help other business owners. So that's 2014. Hopefully we don't get too distracted with other stuff, because we have a tendency to do that. But if we can stick to those things, I think it's going to be a good year.
It should be a stellar year if you can do even half of that. Run us quickly through how a live podcast would work.
Yeah, so we're just sort of experimenting with this, because I know a lot of the big name podcasters do it, but they have like all the hardware and stuff. Like I watched Joe Rogan and This Week in Startups, but they have like the full hardware set up and studio and whatnot. So we've been trying to work out the best way to do it. We did the first one we did the other week, we did on Hangouts, which uses YouTube Live, so it streams live, and then Hangouts does the video conferencing. It seemed to work pretty well, so I think that's what we're going to stick with. We've also got GoToWebinar, which doesn't have good recording, so it's kind of rules itself out as an option. We can use ScreenFlow to record it, but it just doesn't really work that well, and we can't stream it live easily. There's too much friction for people getting on a webinar. So I wanted to make sure that we can just say, we're jumping on the call in 10 minutes. Come and check us out at startupchat.co. and it would just be streaming live right there, which we can do with Hangouts. There are other options that we haven't. We've looked at a few options. We haven't looked at things like Ustream, which look good, but they're quite expensive. And if Hangouts works, which is actually free, then we'll stick with that.
It sounds like a great experiment. I'll be very keen to see how that unfolds.
Well, you're going to come on an episode, so
absolutely, absolutely. Now, part 3 of the podcast, Dan, is where we dive deep into one specific area. So the question I wanted to bring to you is, what specific web marketing tactic brings you the most joy and why?
Yeah, so I think I would just choose written content or blog posts. It's probably boring, but we've tried lots of different ways of marketing content. We've had various levels of success. Our podcast is not really that successful. It's really good for networking and things, but it's not good for traffic. It's not good for conversions. The live thing is going to be exciting. I'm really keen to do that and to kind of just have more of a discussion rather than kind of having topics that you roll off. But for me, my favorite content is writing. So, and that's where we've had the most success. Like I did a post at the end of last year on our biggest content successes, and the ones that were really up there, like the ones with like 5,000 views, those type of ones they're either really detailed guides on things. Like I've done a podcasting guide, and we had a guide on AdWords, content marketing guide. Those things tend to do really well. Or they're like kind of personal stuff. So like anytime we like reveal something, personal about our business or struggles we're going through, and we also at the same time make it actionable for other people, those posts tend to go pretty well. So yeah, written content. I mean, in terms of how we do it, that's a pretty big topic. We have a lot of ideas coming to us because we have ways of making those ideas come to us. So we're never really short of ideas. We could probably spend the whole time talking about that if you want. But yeah, having lots of ideas. I love hitting publish. So I don't like write something and then give it to someone else to hit publish and syndicate and write up the notes and stuff. Like I actually get my energy from getting to that point where I hit the publish button. So that really drives me. If I can dedicate 3 hours to something in the afternoon, and I know at the end of that 3 hours I'll be able to publish a post, then I'll just be laser focused for that afternoon. So finding out what it is that drives you, I think, is important. And for me, it's just that hitting that publish button and just creating something new. And then prioritizing it. We prioritize it as well. Both me and my co-founder spend probably at least 2 hours every day creating content. And we know it's important, so we prioritize it. And if you prioritize something, then it gets done.
And when you say prioritize, does it make it all the way into your calendar, into your diary?
It depends what it is. Something like this. So we, like this, I would consider content because I'm doing an interview on someone else's show. And before this interview, I did another one on the Business Growth podcast with Spencer Shaw, and that was with Alex at the same time. Those kind of things go into the calendar, and obviously we don't miss them. Creating content, I don't normally put as a calendar reminder because I've sort of got it as a habit. But again, it depends on what you like. It depends on if you need that in there. For me, my habit is basically get all of the business stuff sorted first, make sure all the clients are looked after, make sure the developers are on task, they know what they're doing for the day, get some lunch, come back from lunch, make sure all my emails are read. And it sounds inefficient, but all my emails are always read, so I'm always at inbox 0. And when I'm in that state where I just know there's nothing else to worry about, then I know I can just spend 2 or 3 hours on content and create something really good.
Inbox 0 must be a nice feeling, Dan. Toby's like that. My business partner, Toby's.
It seems like a big challenge for people. Maybe I don't get enough emails. I think I get about 100 a day based on the stats that I look at over the course of a month. So I get, I think, 20 to 30,000 emails a month. Doesn't seem to be that hard to get to inbox 0 every day, but I don't know. Maybe other people are getting more emails, or don't know.
Now, Dan, one of the things I've really admired about your content is the amount of backlinks that you can attract. You're like a backlink magnet. Now, my question is, 1, how do you do it? And 2, is there like a pro tip you can give us so that we can try and emulate the same number of backlinks that you get? Like, yours are crazy.
Well, I can give you a pro tip, is to not worry about backlinks. I wouldn't even be able to tell you how many backlinks I've got. I don't even know if we, how do you know? Do you go on like Ahrefs or something? Or
Well, I mean, just the blog post you put on my blog the other day, so pretty much within a couple of hours of it going live, there was 13 backlinks. And then I've noticed
I'm not doing anything. I'm not doing anything.
You're just writing good quality content, right? And people are finding it and linking to it.
Yeah, and I think knowing what good quality content is part of the problem, because there's a lot of good content out there. Like if you're in our industry, you go write a blog post about what are my top 10 WordPress plugins. It's probably good content, but it's been written 1,000 times before. And being able to create something that takes the next leap from that to something that hasn't been written before is, I guess, it's a good to great content. And some people find it easy to create that great content. I had to learn because I created a lot of content before I did anything that got any traction. I think I looked the other day at the content I'd done. I think I'd done 350 articles before I'd had a single article get more than 10 tweets over years. So I had to learn the difference between good content and great content. And so to me, backlinks SEO is not something that interests me at all. And in my last business it was. Now I don't care about it. I mean, I do a little bit like on site, like I use Yoast to make sure that the titles and stuff are there. But I just think, like our sites now are getting 5 times the traffic my old one was back when I was obsessed about SEO. And I think to me it makes, if you can do both, if you can focus on quality content, you can also like actively go out and get backlinks if that's like the work you enjoy doing. Then I don't know what kind of person enjoys that kind of work. I'll probably offend people here, but I don't enjoy that sort of work. So I mean that's my pro tip. Yeah.
Nice. So again, for the more advanced listeners, what are some of the key components, like based on these 350 articles you wrote before you got more than 10 tweets and the hundreds of other blog posts you've written since then? What are some of the key characteristics that have been particularly useful that you keep turning back to and going, I know this, or I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure, 99% sure that this type of content or this article's going to resonate with your audience?
Yeah, I'm just pulling up a blog post because I wrote a really long, detailed blog post about this, which not only tells you what those things are, but it demonstrates it. And in this particular blog post, I set about trying to create a piece of content that did really well, which I don't normally do. But in this particular case, I'm like, surely there's an actual formula for creating content that works well. And by the way, this content has moved since it first existed. So it says there's 4 tweets on there, but I think there was 250 or something back when it was on my old blog. And when you move them, the tweets don't come across. But anyway, so this post really looked at like what differentiates between a piece of content that is good and one that is great. And there are a lot of things in that post that we can't cover in a short question, but I think if I was to summarize it, it would be just doing every aspect well. So like you guys do design really well. Like your stuff is always really nice to look at. A lot of blogs, they're ugly and they use cheap, shitty graphics. And I mean, that could be it. It could be the difference between having a really nice post that goes really well to having one that people ignore because they see a cheap graphic on there. The title could be, rather than here are my top 10 WordPress plugins, you could say something like, 10 WordPress plugins that are guaranteed to grow your business according to, I don't know, I'm making stuff up. It's not very good. But if you actually spend time on the title, that could be the difference as well. That could be the difference between a post having no traction and a post having amazing traction. If you spend time on the post, so that particular post, I think I spent probably a week or so full-time work on that post. So it's about 4,000 or 5,000 words. It's got about 10 or 15 custom graphics in there that are just for that post. I think I linked to all the different posts. It's got actually 10 quotes from other influencers in it. So I went out to influencers and said, what content marketing is good. So I've got quotes in there. I've got all sorts of detailed stuff. I've got about 20 or 30 links of references of stuff I've worked on to come up with that post. And I think it shows when you spend time on something. If you create 100 posts that you spend an hour on, it might be worth testing whether you're better off doing one post that takes you 100 hours or 2 posts that take you 50 hours and see what kind of traction that gets, and focusing on every little detail, making sure everything's right, and And it's not a formula, but I think that definitely increases your chance of success.
I think I certainly agree with you. They're taking the time to actually do something that is much more thorough and much more valuable to the reader, because, as you say, it's easy to spend an hour on a blog post and hit publish, and unless you're a really good writer, what comes out after the first hour isn't, generally speaking, great quality stuff. Maybe eventually it is, but I think that extra little effort to polish stuff and to really think about your headline, to really think about linking off to other articles, and mentioning influencers, for example, all those little things that you've spoken about there, those 1%ers can make such a big difference.
Yeah, and I think like sometimes it's also hard to know what kind of problem your content's solving. Like, you might think like I've done another one which is probably a good case study, which is a similar topic that was something like how to be an epic content marketer, and it had a quiz in there. It had quotes from about 10 different content marketers. It was about 4,000 words. It had an interactive quiz where you can go, yep, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. Click to get a result. It had an integrated tweet so that like if you got a good score on the quiz, you can press that and tweet your result. And that was my third attempt of trying to like manufacture greatness in my content. And it was a massive flop. And why was it a flop? I don't know. Probably because it just wasn't solving a problem for people. Like people have specific problems that they need solved, and it might be hard to know whether you're tapping into one of those, and that's why doing a lot of content helps. But sometimes just picking the right problem is all you need to do.
Nice, Dan. Thank you for that. Now, part 4 of the podcast, I'm always interested in who you've been learning from, both in person or via books or blogs. Who are the people that have influenced your content marketing or your business career?
Well, you, for sure. Yeah, definitely your blog was what got me into content marketing in the first place. So you definitely should be mentioned first. And Brendan Sinclair as well, back in those days, I used to read his blog. Like I'd go out to coffee with him and spill coffee all over myself. And 5 minutes later, there's an article on the internet about me spilling coffee all over myself. I'm like, wow, how does this guy like create so much content? So, and just I mean, Brendan's really good for just general business stuff and particularly around web agency stuff. So he was a really big influencer early on. The other people I'd mentioned, James Schramko is a guy who I've followed for a long time and just talks a lot of sense. And also is an absolute content machine. So I've had him on our show a few times. He's a straight shooter. And if you want to learn about how to do a lot of content, he's the guy. Dan Andrews is another guy who runs the Tropical MBA podcast and the Dynamite Circle private forum, and I've learned a lot from him and just the relationships as well that have come out of that. Like there's a lot of people in his forum who are really big parts of our community now, and customers and promoters of our stuff. And so I owe a lot of that to Dan Andrews. And the other guy I'd mention is probably Neil Patel, who I continue to look up to as the person who is creating the best content out there. And we chatted to him the other day, and I think I've had him on my podcast 4 times, maybe 5 times. And we always get something new. And I mean, the simple fact of it is that he's got a personal blog in our industry that's getting 500,000 visits a month, which he's doing all the content for, other than like the guides and video stuff that he gets co-writers in for. Just the fact that he has those results. And not only that, he's replicated it on other sites, like he's started the Kissmetrics blog and the Crazy Egg blog. Both of those are getting more than a couple of 100,000 visits a month. So, I mean, if you're interested in content marketing, especially if you're in our industry, then he's the guy.
And finally, Dan, are there any closing thoughts or final piece of advice that you've got for our listeners?
Advice is kind of hard when you're doing a podcast like this, but I think one piece of advice that served me pretty well is focus on what you're good at, not what's working for other people. So I like to look for those sources of momentum. And like I can sort of see when someone else is doing something good, like take Schramko, for example. There's a lot of people who watch what Schramko's doing with the videos and go out and try to do the same thing. Whereas what I do is see a guy who's in his element, who's doing something he's very good at. He's creating a lot of very useful content. He's doing it every day. He's solving problems. So I take the things that I can see he's doing, the reasons why he's doing it. I don't take what he's doing. So, I mean, I wouldn't rule it out. I've tried doing videos, but it's not our best stuff for us. So to me, the important point is to look at what other people are doing, but don't copy what they're doing. Just look at the strategy if you can, because it's often not a case of asking them, because a lot of people don't really know why things are working for them. Like you can guess. Like I don't know why we've got this much momentum. I can guess some of the reasons, but yeah, a lot of it is just looking a little bit deeper and saying, yeah, actually, I think I know what he's doing. I'm going to take some of that on board. So that's probably my tip. It's probably not that exciting, but anyway, that's what it is.
I think
in terms.
Sorry, I think it totally is. Those things that you actually do and you look forward to, and it brings you energy and brings you strength when you do it. Sometimes you don't even know why. Like for me, writing the Blue Wire News is much more invigorating than writing a blog post. It's still writing, but for some reason, writing the newsletter I find much more enjoyable, and I gravitate towards doing that. So I gravitate towards email marketing, and I thoroughly enjoy these podcasts, even though I'm just starting out, because you get to talk to people and learn from them. But I totally agree with you, doing what makes you happy and what really brings you joy.
Yeah, I think it's so important, and I think it's much more important than following your passion if it's not the same thing. But like if people talk about following their passion in business, to me it's just you make a business about whatever you want to make your business about, but just make sure that you're spending your time doing stuff you enjoy. And for us, we're spending our time doing content which we both love, and that results in good results for us. If we were doing other things, I'm sure our results wouldn't be as good. So that's something that we want to. Yeah, it's something we live by. So in terms of where you can check out what we're doing, I mentioned startupchat.co, and that's our weekly podcast. We also have a lot of content on there because we write about stuff we're passionate about. A lot of it is not to do with WordPress because neither of us are really passionate about WordPress as such. We love it, obviously, but what really gets us excited is talking about business and talking about conversions and what's working, and monthly reports, income, helping other startups, that kind of stuff. So some of our best content is on that startupchat.co. And then wpcurve.com is our business, and wpcurve.com/blog is where the content is. A lot of that content is to do with conversions because that's something I'm interested in. And we've got things on there like training courses on how to boost your conversions and the document I mentioned before and free giveaways and stuff like that. So yeah, check that stuff out. If you want to get me directly, just email dan@wpcurve.com if you've got any questions.
Dan, on that note, thank you so much for your time today. How's the weather at the Gold Coast today?
Well, it's actually quite hot in here because I'm working in my garage because there's a really mad echo in my house. I'm working from home today, and it's extremely hot in this garage. So if you can see me like dripping with sweat, then that's why. But it's pretty nice outside.
Awesome. Well, mate, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and thanks on behalf of all the listeners. See you later.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me, and well done to doing this podcast. I think you'll be a natural at it, and I'm looking forward to listening to it and checking it out.
Thanks, Dan. See you later. That brings us to the end of our interview with Dan Norris. I really enjoyed his transparency with some of his successes and failures during the show, particularly his advice to focus on what you're good at. We spend a lot of time looking at other marketers and trying to emulate what they do. But he made a very good point about not necessarily copying exactly what they do, but really following what brings you the most joy, because, that's where you get energy and that's where you actually do your best work. So that was a great chat with Dan. We will put all those links and everything else in the show notes.
Yeah, that's a really good point from Dan. And, thanks, Dan, very much for coming on the show. As always, the show is brought to you all by Web Marketing That Works, our new book, and specifically the bonus 33 free templates that go with it. If you're keen to download those, just jump over to our website, bluewiremedia.com.au/book. And the intent is to always deliver actionable advice wherever we can. So feedback and questions are welcome. Please let us know via email or Twitter. My email address is toby.jenkins@bluewiremedia.com.au or @Toby_Jenkins on Twitter. How about yours, Ads?
I am adam.franklin@bluewiremedia.com.au or @Franklin_Adam on Twitter. So thank you very much for joining us, listeners. If you enjoyed the show, we would really appreciate an honest review on iTunes. and we will aim to give a shout out to the people who give us a 5-star review. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.